I'm doing a documentary exploration on the film Misunderstood Minds. It was a 2002 documentary that followed the lives and disabilities of several students in several different areas of the nation in vastly different situations. It tracked a student, Sarah Lee, in New York, in Harlem, actually, who had a language comprehension and expression disability. A student, Nathan, from North Carolina, who had a phonic awareness disability. Student, Lauren, who had a social disability and attentiveness issue. Student, Adam, from Boston, who was several grade levels behind in reading, who had a reading comprehension disability. And a student, Nathan, again, who had an output disability where he imagined where he wanted to do but could not get it out of himself. The purpose of this documentary, to me, was to highlight the importance of early and structured intervention. There was a very big running theme along of this documentary where there was a student, there was a child, there were the child's parents, and then there was the school, and then somebody else involved who was helping all these three groups really figure out what this disability was with the student and what was going on, and providing overall clarity about how to best help the student succeed. The ways in which the disabled-bodied and able-bodiedness were represented was really unique. I found this representation most often to come to light whenever they were interviewing the evaluator, the psychologist. I forget his name, but there was a doctor that a lot of the students went to really tested all of their abilities and pinpointed what their strengths and weaknesses were. And that's kind of the frame that it was all set in. The students had very obvious strengths, but also had areas of deficits as well. And in more than one case, it wasn't that the disability knocked them down a tier or that they were less of a person because of it, but they were just a unique character that were able to do some things very well, were not able to do other things very well, and thus created their own kind of coping mechanisms by taking their strengths and really applying it to their weaknesses to either compensate or just cover it up. I thought it was a new representation for me. I've heard of asset-based thinking, but this really took each student and broke down their assets as well as their weaknesses and really talked about how they come together and interact with each other. Explain how this made me more aware of disability inclusion. This film was from 2002, so it's 15 years old, and a lot has happened in 15 years, and it was interesting. It was most interesting to hear parents' perspectives on what was going on. A lot of them feared and were really against things like resource room, and they always described it as some sort of dungeon, some sort of castaway place, some sort of basement, some place you really did not want to send your child. And I think from an inclusion standpoint, they didn't see that as being very inclusive. And I'm in an environment now where that isn't really much the case. And breaking it down on a smaller level, it was really interesting to hear about the disabilities themselves. One that stuck out to me was Nathan, the second Nathan, who had an output problem where he would just get overwhelmed. The psychologist described him as being a finely tuned car that just had a really small gas tank. And he described to Nathan that the way he holds his pencil, he had a motor problem, and so that he couldn't connect his actual fingers to his brain to write the words he wanted to write. And it really came out and became obvious because he gripped his pencil really rigid, wrapping his fingers around his thumb, and it actually strained him to work. It strained him to work, and this was due to a lack of connection between his actual musculature, his motor control, and his mind, what he was thinking. And we learned all about dysgraphia and other sorts of motor control disabilities, and it was nice to make that connection and to see what it looked like really represented. Some questions I have is they brought up a topic that they brought up a word that I haven't heard yet in special education, and it was demystification, where it was a time where they really explained thoroughly to the child what their disability was, what caused it, how it affected them, how they manage, and so on and so forth. And I thought that was very powerful, and they explained themselves that yes, that's a very powerful thing. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of what is going on. And it can lead to so much. It can lead to just a great sense of peace because these children no longer think, oh, I'm stupid, and they're never asking. They don't have to ask the questions of what's wrong with me. They get a clear answer of this is what's going on, and this is why. I haven't really heard of that yet, and they mentioned the opposite of that was a tendency to kind of dance around the issue and not really admit to a student that they have a disability and just kind of ignoring the issue. And I'm wondering at what points do you really address that or talk about it with students? That seems kind of like an uncomfortable topic, especially if you don't know where they're at with their disability, or you don't even feel that might be your place, or you don't feel like you're the most informed person to be talking about them with the disability. Should there be a parent outreach first? But I thought that was a very powerful concept that I would like to know more about. All in all, it was for being 15 years old, I thought it was a very relevant documentary to today. I enjoyed the wide perspective, the wide range of students it saw, from age to disability to situation. It really brought a lot of, and it let me see what was constant. And what was constant was the level of accommodation and just the work that was put in by so many parties, parents, psychologists, and the school to really make things work for students.